I've seen an awful lot of change. I think the most visible change is actually in the building, how hospitable it looks when you walk in. You've got the new paintings produced by the students, you've got a really set of sort of innovative, inspiring posters, you've got brand new furniture, it's been completely repainted and rebuilt. The teachers clearly appreciate that, so I think physically, culturally, that's a really interesting sort of state to sort of see the school change to. The next big thing for me is the mindset of the teachers and the manner of the teachers. You can see that when you walk into a classroom now, it's actually all about, I'm showing you what I can do, rather than, goodness me, what is he looking for, what am I doing wrong? It's now much more confident in the way that they're responding to a classroom observation. So I think that's really distinctive. And the features of the classroom, agendas, lesson objectives, the way the tables are set out within the room, the response of the students, the engagement of students, all those things are so much better than they were. So I think that's another big sign. And the leader is a leader now as well. Rise for me was all about trying to generate this growth mindset in teachers. And I think one of the early indications was that there were some fantastic diamond teachers that hadn't really been identified already. So I think it was all about trying to A, ensure that they were motivated and enthused, and B, to use their enthusiasm to try and support other teachers in their rate of improvement. So Rise is all about trying to identify that and use that to build capacity to improve teaching and learning across the whole school. And that was set through different deltas. Those different deltas were things like agenda, things like learning outcomes, things like classroom engagement and activity. And again, those things now much more consistently applied and visible inside classrooms at St.Willibrords than they were back in May. And I think the big win is that we're able now to sort of see teachers make visible progress and get teachers comfortable with having people in the classroom, videoing their lessons, having SLT come back and feedback about improvement. One of our objectives to begin with last May was all about school culture, and what type of school culture we wanted, and also making sure that staff bought into that culture. And we actually tapped into their own individual values as teachers, and also the Christian values of the school too. So how do you match the school's values with the values of the teachers who work here when you've never done an audit of that before, and you're actually perhaps not entirely clear what the school values should really be? So the whole process has been to assess individually what individual teachers' values are, what motivates them, what inspires them, why they come to work, what they like most about being here, what they see the role as a teacher of being. And then trying to identify what the role of St.Willibrords School is within that context. So what does St.Willibrords exist to do? And finally, what can St.Willibrords do better? What values can it illustrate more effectively than it is at the moment? And that whole exercise is mapped, so we can see what key values individual teachers have, we can see what values they see in the school, and we can see what the priorities are for the school going forward. And that way that helps in inducting new staff into the school, it helps in trying to mould the current culture, and it's also really an interesting selling point for new staff who are thinking about applying as well.
3. These are all the HR manuals and documentation that we were able to achieve over our 6 months of work, of the coaching that I received from Robert, so that I could become a better school leader as well as run a high-performing, high-functioning school. So Robert, if you would just like to share very quickly about our work that we did in HR.
Yeah, we did an awful lot to begin with, didn't we, about why there was a need for job descriptions, the format of those job descriptions, and we saw as the school began to grow and new members of staff were added at different managerial levels, there's perhaps a lack of clarity and also maybe a degree of worry and threat seen by new entrants. So we had to make sure that each member of the team felt wanted and required, and the way to do that was to redesign job descriptions with that in mind, to provide some clarity but also some team ethos too. So the whole purpose of those job descriptions is to look at a set of core competences for individual posts, to remap what the hierarchy of the school might look like going forward, and to build in a set of policies and procedures that mean you've got straight lines within the school, strategies that are very clear and that can be adopted by teachers. Within that, we've got a new framework for induction of new staff, we've got policies and things like sending email and dress code, and these things again are providing that degree of conformity and perhaps also a degree of shared culture that might then come out in the value statements that we spoke about before.
And what do you think about the core competence, the competency framework that we developed and what we also looked at building?
I think that's good. I mean, it's a core set of competences. So it's fairly narrow, but it's things that are value driven and absolutely essential to each individual job role. And then beyond that, there are sorts of gaps that we've got in there, which are for competencies that might be added as the organisation goes forward, and that role has to begin to change in the context of that change in the school. So that way we have a job description that's quite generic, but again will change and evolve going forward.
So Robert, we've done some really interesting work over the past 6 months under your leadership and guidance with respect to data-driven instruction. You know, we know that schools are not using data, and really if we start using the data that we have, we can really drive instruction, make sure that no child is left behind. What do you think of the work that St.Willibrords has done over the past 6 months over data-driven instruction?
I think that's improved really quite dramatically, and I think the ideas at the moment around the MCQ tests and trying to get individual teachers able to use those to drive the planning for the next lesson, that's a real sort of step in the right direction. So I think that's something we can perhaps use certainly in other schools in India, maybe even internationally. It's the idea that there might be a set of exit tests, maybe 10 or 15 multiple choice questions that each teacher can ask on different topics. The results come through via Gradelizer. They can work out which students are in the top quartile, the bottom quartile, and that then helps them to identify how the next lesson might need to proceed from the beginning for certain. Over time, it helps them to sort of identify who's consistently in the top quartile, who's consistently in the poorer quartile. Is there any evidence that we're actually able to improve these students who perhaps have performed less well to begin with? So data-driven instruction in terms of classroom delivery is really helped by this tool that we've been able to use through Gradelizer.